Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm so glad you're here. Today I'm going to show you how I made this circle top table. I had a lot of questions about this table. It is a 6-foot round and it's really not as difficult as you'd think. I am going to say that it's an intermediate project, but mostly because the top makes it a little more difficult. You have to be able to know how to laminate boards together. I do have a video about that and I'll link it here, but otherwise the base is very simple and that's where we're going to start. Okay, so I had Home Depot cut down my 4x4s for me, and I have my measurements written up, what I want to do. So each one of these I'm going to bring over to my miter saw, and I changed my miter saw degree to 10. I'm at the 10 degree line, so it's going to have just a bit of an angle, and I'm going to cut each side of the 4x4s parallel at a 10 degree angle, which will create kind of a slant, so the board will sit at an angle. The post will sit, the leg. Bear with me, will sit at an angle, and that should give it just a more decorative look, and I think it should work. I'll show you what I mean. So you can see here I'm cutting that 10 degree angle off the ends of both the sides of one leg, and 10 degrees is really slight, but it's enough to make a difference when it's standing upright. And I'll do this to all 4 legs, and I'm using the previous cut leg to help guide me on where to cut the next leg so that they are all the same size. Now that I have all 4 legs cut and ready to go, I'm going to start working on the cross pieces that will connect all 4 legs. And these pieces also need to be angled, and these angles are not parallel. So on each side, it will be the opposite direction, and that's how the legs will attach. Hang on and I'll show you. Cutting the 10 degree miters on these 2 edges of this cross piece allow for the legs to angle in just slightly. Now we're going to start working on the half flap pieces for the cross pieces. This will allow these 2 4x4s to connect together in an X pattern, but we need to remove some material from the middle. So I'm marking the middle with my square, as you can see here, and then I'm going to mark the exact thickness of both 4x4 pieces because they will fit together essentially. Now I've got center marked lengthwise, and now I need to do it in the middle of the board as well. 4x4s are actually 3.5 inches thick. So I'm marking my board at 1 3/4 inches to make the center X. And I'm going to do that on both pieces. Now I'm going to line the top board with the bottom board, and I'm trying to get those lines to match perfectly so that I can mark the thickness of the board. That way I'll know exactly what material needs to be removed. Now that they're lined up, I can go ahead and take my pencil and mark both sides. Now that I have the first board marked exactly, I'm going to cross it all out so that I don't get confused when I'm removing material. And I'm going to lay the next board upside down because I need to remove the bottom side of this board and the top side of the other one so they can fit together. I'm going to line them up, and I'm going to use the previously marked board to mark this one. That way they will both match each other and it should be a perfect fit. Now I'm going to roll the board on its side so that I can mark center on both sides of the board as well. This is going to tell me when I'm using my miter saw to remove material how deep I need my blade to go. And I need it to go 1 3/4 inches down into both sides. Now, most miter saws nowadays have something on the side called a depth stop. Check your miter saw and see if you have one. It will really help this process go a lot more smoothly. You can use a level or a square to mark how deep you need the blade to cut, which in my case, I needed to cut 1 3/4 inches deep. And then you set your stop to meet that depth exactly. And your miter saw will not cut deeper than that with the depth stop on. Next, you're going to want to add a stop block right in front of your fence. This will hold the piece that you're cutting out further, which will allow your circular blade to make a straight cut for this lap joint. And now with the depth stop engaged, you can make a series of thin cuts, maybe 1/8 of an inch apart, maybe less, maybe more of a 1/16. And we're just going to do a whole bunch of cuts to fill that entire space of the material that we need to remove. You should be very careful not to overcut with the saw. Don't go past the lines that you've already made and marked. And make a series of just straight cuts, sliding your miter through. Now for the fun part. Once you've finished making those cuts, you can take your thumbs and just push and pull them all in. You can use a chisel or even a painter's knife or something to get in between those little pieces of wood and just snap them out of place. You will still have a bunch of little pieces that are poking up, and we'll need to smooth this out in just a second. Now while I've got my saw all set up, I'm going to go ahead and do the second piece as well. And I'm going to follow the exact same steps I did before. Now to clean up all the rough pieces left behind, you're just going to take your miter saw, lower it down and turn it on, and you are going to slide the board back and forth underneath your saw. It will knock off all those high points and leave you with a really smooth piece. Okay, I always say that. The saga of the circle table continues. Now that I have my half-lapped X base, that will go in the middle, I'm going to attach all the legs to the ends, and I am gonna do this with pocket holes. I've made this table before, and I feel like pocket holes really give enough strength for a joint. If you don't like using pocket holes and this offends you in some way, you can totally use dowels or a domino or another form of joinery that suits you. I'm gonna do pocket holes. I'm gonna use 2.5 inch pocket hole screws, and I'm gonna start that now. Right now, what I'm debating is whether or not I wanna put pocket holes on the top and the bottom, or just the bottom. I'm thinking I'll do just the bottom and see how I feel. I'm definitely using glue, and I will be clamping all of it together. So I'm gonna flip the piece over, and I am going to, or these, and I'm gonna start pocket holing them. Let's go. So So I actually have the K4 pocket hole system by Craig Jig, and one of the things that this K4, it's right there, boop, it does really well is 2x. What it doesn't do super well is these big honking guys, because technically the pocket holes aren't really made for this thick of lumber joints. So what you can do is flip your piece over. I'm doing pocket holes on the bottom so that they won't be seen. And then you're gonna take out this part of your K4, and it needs to be clamped 1 1/4 inches from the edge. That will give you enough depth to drill your 2.5 inch pocket hole screw through, and you'll pop out mid-range over here. Now I'm going to use my square, and I'm going to mark up on the legs from the bottom 2 inches, and that's where my 4x4s will attach to the legs. I'm using Titebond glue and 2.5 inch Craig screws and attaching them just like that. So I added some 2x4s to the top cross pieces of the base just to add a little support to the tabletop. I just used the same half lap method with 2x4s, and this will just ensure that the top is really supported nicely. For this part of the process, this is where the intermediate portion comes into play. Joining these edges before you laminate a tabletop together is really important, or using a table saw to rip nice straight edges and clamping them all together can be kind of tricky sometimes. I'm going to direct you to my putting a tabletop together, assembling a tabletop video, and that's where I kind of go over this entire process. Now, because this is a 6-foot top, I decided to do this in 2 sections just to make it a little easier to handle, since I do all of this myself. Doing this in 2 sections was actually probably not the best idea. As you can see, it left me with a really rough top. I'm not completely flush, so it's going to take a lot of work to get this tabletop where I want it to be. I'm just using my tape measure to mark center of 6 feet so that I can begin the circle cutting process. I need to cut a circle out of this giant slab of wood. It's not a slab, of this giant thing that I've pieced together. So I'm going to use my router, and I'm going to use this scrap piece of ply, and I'm going to show you how I'm going to do this. I'm going to cut out where the router piece will go, screw this into the router, and then screw it down over there and go. I'll show you. So I started this process with a regular flush cut router bit. It was a 1/2 inch router bit, and I quickly found out this was not the bit that I needed. So I soon changed to a Freud upcut router bit, 1/2 inch bit. I will link it in the description below. It cuts so much more smoothly, so I would jump straight to that one if you plan to be cutting thick wood with a router. the circle is cut, it's all about sanding down, smoothing off all the edges, and staining and finishing as you see fit. I sanded all the way up to 120 grit, and then I used a Minwax stain and a polyacrylic finish, and I love it. There you have it, a 6-foot round table that you can build yourself. I forgot to mention that I used alder as the tabletop for this one and regular Doug fir for the 4x4 base, and Minwax is a dark walnut stain. Thank you guys so much for following along. I'm so glad you're here and that you come back every week. It really makes my day. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments below. I'd be happy to answer. You can follow me on Instagram, you can follow me on Facebook and TikTok, and also find free plans on my website, eternalharvestdecor.com. As always, links will be linked in the description below, and hopefully you'll tune in next time for the next project.